All right, everybody, what's going on, man? How y'all doing? Welcome to another edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. And I am your tour guide around the SWAC Seawells coming at you on this snowy Tuesday, man, in Baton Rouge, man. We are in the midst of a snowstorm. If you're from the north somewhere, this ain't nothing really for y'all. But people down here, man, this is kind of different for us. Every so often to do this, so we at home on a snow day. So I decided to go ahead and drop my second set of SWAC Power Rankings today. Gonna have my recap of Monday night's action dropping tomorrow. Thursday is SWAC Smoke. Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, sometime I have a short that shows my picks for Saturday's games, and then Sunday we'll recap those games. And Monday I have my second part of my transfer portal series dropping. And so we have a lot of stuff coming at you. And I didn't do as good yesterday on my picks as I did the previous days. I went 2-2 on my picks. So I got the two afternoon games wrong and the two evening games I got right. So I ended up going 2-2, putting my record at 12-4 on the 12-4 since I started doing these. So not a bad record right now, but yesterday was kind of rough. Early, got better late. So y'all make sure y'all hit those socials. Facebook is SWAC Talk, Instagram SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76. Don't forget to like the video, comment, and share your thoughts on the action and your thoughts on the rankings. This week had a lot of movement in the rankings. I figured as much with a lot of impactful games taking place. Some teams dropped who I thought could be teams that continue to rise, and some teams took advantage of a strong weekend and rose up the ranks a little bit. Just for a little bit of housekeeping and transparency, I'm using conference only stats in these numbers. Like I like to say, you get a little bit better of an idea of who these teams are when you look at them against conference opponents, because everybody plays different levels of opponents in the non-conference. Some teams play a bunch of power teams. Some teams play a few power teams and a bunch of low-level teams. So, you might have a team that's scoring like 85 points a game, but they're playing a lot of teams that they overmatch. And then when they get in conference play, the numbers drop when they play a comparable opponent. So conference play kind of gives you a better idea of who those teams are and what they are. So, I go with that more so than anything, just for the sake of kind of keeping some equality amongst the teams. So let's go ahead and get into this, man. Like I said, y'all go ahead and get into this. We'll start as we did before. We start at number 12. And 12 in Mississippi Valley. And their record right now is 2-17 on the season. They're 0-6 in conference. But they had a rough weekend this weekend. They lost both of their games this weekend to FAMU and Bethune-Cookman. And they were my number 12 team last week, and they stay at number 12, and they're on a 10-game losing streak. I don't know when they're gonna snap it. They have Grambling and Southern this week, so that's another two possible losses. Although they are at home, and Valley sometimes can creep up on you at home, but they could very well be on the midst of a long slide before they can get themselves a W. So this team hasn't really had a lot go right for them. If I had to say they had anything going their way right now, it would be the performance of Alvin Stredick. Right now, he's averaging 12 points per game, and he's averaging 6 rebounds per game. And both of those numbers lead the team. And as their big guy, so to speak, he's second on the team in assists with 8. So, not a lot going their way this season. He's probably the one guy who has been a steady presence for them in conference play. They offensively, they haven't really done anything. They're scoring 58 points per game. They're giving up 80 points per game. So they have a scoring margin of negative 22 points. So they're getting outscored by 22 points per game in conference play. They're not shooting the ball well. They're shooting 40% from the field. Defensively, opponents are shooting 48%. 3-point percentage, they're shooting 26%, and 3-point defense, the opponents shooting 39%. They make They make about 4.5 threes per game, 4.3 threes per game. So they don't really make a lot of threes, and they've taken 100 threes, which is probably, I guess you could say, kind of in the middle of the pack. But they don't really shoot a lot of threes, and they don't make a lot of threes. And they've been struggling on the boards, averaging 30 rebounds a game. They're getting out rebounded by 8 rebounds a game. And their turnover numbers aren't great. They're averaging 16 turnovers a game. They're forcing 12.8 turnovers per game. And they're averaging about 8 assists per game. That's the fewest in the conference. Like I said, just not a lot of positive things to say about this team. I don't know, when if they're gonna be able to put together any kind of a run. They just haven't really been able to find a lot of positivity for them on either end of the court. And this spot will probably be theirs for the foreseeable future. I don't even think I think they'll step down from where they were last season. Last season they had some guys who could actually put points on the board. But this season they don't really have that, and that gets you beat pretty soundly in every game you play. So until they can get some offense, I think they're gonna stay where they are, and that's a big problem. Moving on to my number 11 team, who is down from number 10 last week, and that's UAPB, the Golden Lions. They actually I lost my tab. They actually dropped this week. Had a rough week on the road in Florida. They dropped those 2 games, and they are winless still. This is a team who I think has a lot of new guys. They lost a lot of key guys from last season. Their philosophy of who they are is still the same, but the production is still not quite where it needs to be. You look at this team, and they can score. They're a team who can score the ball. Just like last season, they can put points on the board. They're averaging 74 points per game in conference play, but they're giving up 83 points per game in conference play. So they have a negative 8.4 scoring margin. That's the second worst in the conference. So even though they're a top 5 team in scoring, they're last in the league in scoring defense. And that's basically what they are. They're a team who can put points on the board, but they just can't really stop anybody from scoring. They shoot 44% from the field. Their opponents shoot 46% from the field. They're a team who shoots threes at a high clip. They've taken 115 this season. They've made 33. So they're shooting 28% this season, which is far below where they were last season. And right now they're making about 6 threes per game. They had a cold shooting night against Bethune-Cookman last night, and that damages their numbers as well. They play pretty solid 3-point defense. The opponents shoot 32% from the field, from the 3-point line. And they're a really good rebounding team in conference play. They're second at 38 rebounds per game. They do have a tighter rebounding margin at plus 1. Where are they rebounding? Their rebounding margin is plus 1.8. So they do win the rebounding battle a little, by about 2 rebounds a game. When you look at what they do in turnovers, they average about 14.8 turnovers per game. They force 13.4, and they average 12 assists per game. They have some guys who can score. I mean, obviously, Dr. Bradley is a name that I've been saying for the first 3 weekends of the season. He's averaging 24.8 points per game. He's not a guy who's really going to light it up from outside. He's only 2 for 5 from 3. But he's a guy who can get to the line a lot. He's shot 71 free throws already this season, but he's only shooting 54% from the line. So even though he's getting to the line, he's not necessarily cashing in there. But he's shooting 58% from the field, and he averages 9 rebounds a game in conference play. And he leads the team with 19 assists and 13 steals. So and 6 blocks. He leads the team in basically everything except for 3-point shooting. in terms of um, a high sample size of numbers. Um, Kind of cooled down a little bit these last couple games, but still a guy who can make some things happen. Christian Moore is another guy who's averaging 13 points per game. He's shooting 30% from three. Also, Caleb Jones is shooting 37% from three. He's 10 of 27. Um, like I said, they just that issue is on the defensive side of the ball. They just haven't been able to really stop teams from um, they haven't really been able to stop teams from scoring. And when when you playing like that, and everything is hinging on your scoring, um, that puts you in a tough spot when you can't get those stops. When you look at kind of what they've done in conference play, they've given up 73 points to a Bethune-Cookman team who doesn't really score a lot of points. They gave up 86 to FAMU, 75 to Prairie View, 93 to Bama State, and 89 to Alabama A&M. So they've given up a ton of points in all their games, and they've scored a pretty decent clip, but they still haven't really been able to get some stops. And they got Southern and Grambling at home this weekend. Two teams who are gonna be tough matchups for them. We'll see if they can, we'll see if they can make some things happen on the defense being in the flow. They're just gonna be a team that has to outscore their opponents. They are right now on a 5-game losing streak. They're 0-5 in conference, 3-15 overall. And like I said, they dropped from my number 10 spot last week to number 11. So they are one of the last two winless teams in conference play. And so they, the opportunity to keep yourself in the hunt is not gone because this season they're taking 10 teams in the tournament. So, you're still not out of it at all. And if you can go on a little bit of a run and get yourself in the middle of the pack, you should be fine. But this is a team who last season had a swoon that cost them a tournament spot, and they had a lot more capable scorers as a whole than this team does this season. So we'll see if they can get themselves back on track. What better way to do it than this week against the team right now who is just in front of them in the stand in the rankings and the team at the top of the rankings. So they have opportunity at home to make some noise, but they really need to win. Honestly, both of these games to put themselves in a better spot. My number 10 team again. I'm still giving them a little bit of grace for the next week or so, because I do think that this upcoming weekend they'll bounce back. And that's Grambling right now. Grambling is 1-4 in conference, 4-14 overall. They lost their last game. They did have I hate to call one game a streak, but they had a 1-game win streak, I guess you could say. Then they lost to Southern this weekend, so they went 0-1 this weekend, dropping down from my number 9 spot to my number 10 spot. I still, like I said, I still think this team has the ability to be in the mix. Obviously, the window for a regular season title is closing rapidly, but that doesn't really mean a lot other than extra banner in your gym. Winning regular season doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna win a tournament title. So getting in the tournament and making a run is a whole lot better than winning the regular season and going home in the first round. So I do think this is a team that's gonna make the tournament. I think I think when it's all said and done, they're gonna be in a good spot seeding wise. They're still trying to find their way. They haven't really. They have a lot of guys playing right now who were either guys who were role players last season or guys who are new. And Contavious Dozier is not necessarily playing at the level that he was last season, but that's the guy who can take over games. We've seen it before. So I'm not doubting him. And they caught a rough break at the end of the game Saturday. But their shooting just has not been a good factor for them. They're really struggling to score points right now. They're at 63 points per game, but that's kind of what Grambling is. Grambling's gonna always be one of those mid 60s to low 70s type of team that play really good defense and have lower scoring, lower scoring physical, low tempo type of games, and their numbers are kind of playing that out. Like I said, averaging 63 points per game, but they're giving up 69. So they're getting outscored by 5.8 points per game. Right now, their shooting is just not really there. Right now, they're shooting 41% from the field, but defensively, they're allowing opponents to shoot 43%. The three-point shooting really has been an Achilles heel for Grambling. I think they made 4 threes in the game on Saturday. They were like 1 for 12, I think, or something like that in the first half. So they just, they're only shooting 29% from three. 24% from three right now. They're 19 or 79. They have attempted the fewest threes in the conference, and they've made the fewest. They're making an average of 3.8 threes per game. So they're not even living at the 3-point line. They're actually staying away from it. And they're just they're not even stretching defenses in that way, and that's really hurting them. And plus they're playing poor 3-point defense. They're allowing 39% right now from three, which is last in the league. I always said Grambling was a team that was typically bigger and more physical than teams, and this season they're struggling on the boards. They're averaging 34 rebounds per game, which is 9th in the league. The opponents average 31, so they are out rebounding their opponents, but they're just not really being that presence on the boards inside. I don't think they're as big as they had been in terms of size and physicality. Some of that is just guys still trying to figure out their roles. And I think as the season starts to move into the middle portion of the slate, I think they'll start to find themselves. And I think this weekend is going to be a weekend that helps them get there. Playing Valley on Saturday and Pine Bluff on Monday. They average 15 turnovers per game, which is high for them. Grambling's typically a team that doesn't turn the ball over a lot. They're forcing 13, again, not quite Grambling type numbers, and they're only averaging 8.8 assists per game, which is the second fewest in the conference. But they do have they do have the talent. Antoine Burnett is scoring 13 points per game, shooting 40% from three. Like I said, Dozier is at 11 points per game. He's only shooting 18% from three. I think that's gonna improve as he starts to take more shots. Right now, Burnett leads the team in rebounding as well with 7.2 rebounds per game. Dozier has a 1.6 assists per game. Mikhail Stevenson leads the team with 3 assists per game, and PJ Easton leads the team with 7 steals. I'm still not writing this team off because, I think especially the coaching staff, I think they know that getting in the tournament and making the run there is the most important thing. They've won the regular season already before, and then they won the tournament. So that's not really something that they just have to have. I mean, it's good to have as a feather in your cap, but it's not necessary in this conference. Being a one bid league, you got to win the tournament to make it. So just keeping yourself in the hunt. And finding yourself in a good spot. I mean, they really can't afford a lot more losses if they want to have a good seed. So these 2 games this weekend are very important for them to improve their spot because it's there in front of them. They still have games against everybody in front of them. So they still have a lot left to go for. They only have single game matchups against Pine Bluff, Valley, Jackson, and Alcorn. Everybody else they play either 2 more times or 1 more time. So they have an opportunity to make up some ground against these teams if they can start to kind of get some shots to fall and continue to develop their chemistry and get that rotation right. That takes us to our number 9 team. This team dropped from 7 last week, and that's primarily for a couple of reasons. One, they lost their only game that they played this week, and 2, team behind them won their 2 games this week, so they kind of just got jumped a little bit by poll inertia. And that's Alabama A&M. They're 2-3 in conference, 6-12 overall. They're on a 3-game losing streak. They lost to Bama State on Saturday, and they have Texas Southern and Prairie View at home this weekend. So they have an opportunity with 2 home games against teams who are ahead of them, but teams that that they can I think they could compete with. They do have a chance to keep themselves in there. They led Bama State by 13 in the first half of that game, and ultimately ended up losing as Bama State was able to erase that lead and pull away and win. this is a team who, you know, they still struggling with turnovers. They averaging 20 turnovers per game. That, you know, that number dropped a little bit from 22, but you know, they still averaging 20 turnovers per game. They are -6 in turnover margin. They're only forcing 14.8 turnovers per game. So that's still an issue for this team. But this team can put points on the board. They're averaging 75.6 points per game, which is third in the league. Defensively, the opponents are scoring 76 points per game. So that, you know, not a big difference there. They're shooting 41% from the field. Opponents are shooting 39%. When you look at what they're doing from the three-point line, they're shooting about 29%. So they haven't really lit it up in conference from three right now. They shot 134 threes this season, which is the most in the league. So they've let it fly. They're just not dropping for them. If those shots can fall with the clip that they're shooting them, I think that can help them as well. Their opponents are shooting 29% from three, so they're pretty solid there in three-point defense. They just, like I said, they're just having a tough time making those threes. They're making 7 threes per game, you know, so they're not, you know, they're pretty solid when it comes to the amount of threes they make every game. I mean, that's basically 7.8 threes is basically 8 threes a game. So 24 of their points per game are basically coming off of the three ball. And so they're capable of getting that there, but they just are missing a whole lot more than they're making, and that hurts you in games like this, in close games. But they lead the league in rebounding at 42.2 rebounds per game. They're very good inside. They're always a team that's kind of physical, big bodies and guys who are active inside. The opponents average 37 rebounds per game. They lead their third in the league in rebounding margin at 5 rebounds per game. Like I said, their assist numbers are 14.6, which is tops in the league. So they are very unselfish with the ball when it comes to sharing the ball around. Like the issue is just taking care of the ball. Turning the ball over 20 times a game, that's going to hurt you in a lot of ways. They didn't have a lot of turnovers against Bama State, but they had some turnovers in untimely situations. They lead the league in block shots. Again, they're a really strong team inside at 6.2 blocks per game. And they have 7.2 steals per game. So not necessarily getting their hands on the ball for steals, but they're blocking a lot of shots and they rebound well. All those things will come together and help them as the season moves forward. AC Bryant right now is the overall leading scorer. But when you look at conference play, he also leads the team in conference play at 18 points per game. Lorenzo Downey is the only other guy in double figures at 10 points per game. Bryant shooting 35% from three. He's 9 of 26. He's the only guy shooting over 30%. Well, London Riley is also shooting 30%. But as far as guys with multiple attempts, they're the only two guys who really shooting over 30% from the 3-point line. Bryant leads the team in rebounding at 7.4 rebounds per game. He also has 2.4 assists per game, which ties for the team lead, and he has 6 steals to lead the team. Chad Moody leads the team with 18 blocks. So they are a team, like I said, who are very physical inside. They get their hands on a lot of shots, and they rebound extremely well. Chad Moody leads the conference in blocks at 3.6 per game, and in terms of total blocks. So, you know, that's a guy who definitely going to be a factor inside that you're going to have to account for at all times. And so I don't think this team is that far off. This is a big weekend for them with the Texas Southern Prairie View coming up at home. A couple wins here can help them get back in the mix. You know, like I said, they're only at 9 because the number 18 won both of their games this weekend, and obviously that team had to move up, and that's FAMU. They took advantage of playing two teams who are not playing well right now. They beat Pine Bluff and Valley, which, you know, they needed to do. So they got their first 2 conference victories, and they had a solid home weekend, which you definitely want. Sterling Young had a big game against Pine Bluff. I think he scored 37 points in that game. Um, and when when you have a guy that can go off like that, um, that's always going to be a factor. I still think this team is not quite where they want to be. I know Coach Query is probably not happy with where they are right now, but I think they have some guys who can get some things going. Young is averaging 19.6 points per game, shooting 44% from three, and Milton Matthews is scoring 17 points per game, and he's shooting 41% from three. So those two guys, if they can get hot, that keeps them in the hunt for games. Um, they just had a rough go of it early, um, and I think some of that, like I say, I think some of it is just I think they had a bad night uh, last week in Baton Rouge. I think that kind of shaped the way some things look for them. But I do think this team is gonna be in that 7, 8, 9, 10 spot into the tournament. Right now they're 2-3, 5-11 overall. They've won their last two games, so they are on a positive upswing. They do have a tough road trip ahead of them this weekend, going to Alcorn and Jackson State this weekend. So can they maintain that momentum on the road that they got at home? That's going to be a key factor for them. Um, right now, this team is scoring 70 points per game. They're giving up 72. When you look at what they're doing, they're third in the league in field goal shooting at 44%. They're 46% field goal defense, which is ninth in the league. They're third in the league at 3-point shooting at 36%. The opponents shoot 36% as well. That's 10th in the league. They make 8.4 threes per game, so that's third in the league. So they have been really good at making threes. They've taken 116 threes, made 42. So they're not bad at all from the 3-point line. They just have to be consistent. And with so many guys, this is basically an all new team with so many guys still trying to figure out roles and everything. It's going to take them a while to kind of get going. They don't really rebound that well. They had 32 rebounds per game, which is 10th in the league. Their opponents are at 32.4 as well. So that's a pretty even margin right there. I would say when you look at the turnover, they average 14 turnovers per game. They're forcing 11. So they haven't really done a good job of turning teams over. Those 11 forced turnovers are the lowest number in the league. When you can't turn teams over and you basically have to stop them by them missing shots, that kind of stops you from scoring. I mean that slows down your transition, and it kind of slows the tempo of a game down a little bit, which kind of makes them struggle. They average 11 assists per game, so then they're not bad sharing the ball, but that number can always be higher. Interior wise, they average two. They average about where was that number? They average 4.6 blocks per game, which is about fifth in the league. And so they're solid there, but they're last in the league at steals at 4.8. So they don't really have a lot of opportunity to turn teams over and get down the floor. But like I said, having a guy break out for a 30 plus point game last week is always something that can really, shape the perception and identity of a team. And they needed those two wins this week. They could not have went 1-1. They could not if 1-1 would have been bad at home. 0-2 would have been horrible. So being able to win those two games, that put them in a better spot. They jumped from number 11 to number 8, primarily because the two teams in front of them, basically everybody in front of them lost. So they were able to jump those teams, and now they find themselves in a pretty decent spot in the rankings. And I think they have a good opportunity to make the tournament if they can keep themselves in the mix and win a few games on the road, steal a couple of these games on the road and play solidly at home. And that's a good formula to getting where they want to go. Number 7 is Prairie View. This team dropped big time from last week. They were number 3 last week. They dropped to 7. They lost both of their games at home this weekend to Alcorn and Jackson State. And that hurts. Like I said, on my previous show, I said, they really needed to win both of these games. A split at home is never good, but you'll take that. But going 0-2 at home is just not where you want to be. It's not the end all be all because, like I said, this is only the third weekend of conference play, so nothing's concrete. I don't really think this team was a team a lot of people thought would be like a regular season champ. So I think they're still in a good spot to have a good seed going into the tournament. And I think they got the potential to kind of cause some problems for teams as the conference schedule moves on. Right now, they're sitting at 3-3 in conference, 4-15 overall. They've lost their last two games, so it's not obviously not panic button time yet. But I think those two losses do hurt them a lot. Right now, they're averaging 73 points per game. They're giving up about 70 points per game. They lead the conference in field goal shooting at 47%. So they're a good team that can score the ball. But they 11th in field goal defense at 47% as well. So they're another team who's solid on one end of the floor and not so much at the other end. Although they do play pretty good 3-point defense at 29%, and they shoot the three well at 36%. They have 41 of 112 from three, and they make about 6.8 threes per game. I would say one of the biggest deficiencies they have is on the boards. They only average 26.7 rebounds per game, and the opponents average 36.2. So they're getting out rebounded. They're getting out rebounded by 9.5 rebounds per game. So they're if they come up against a team that's really, really more physical than them inside, they do get beat on the boards pretty regularly. They're not a good offensive rebounding team. They only average 6.7 offensive rebounds per game, and they only average 20 defensive rebounds per game. So I would say if they had one deficiency, it's on the boards. That's something that's going to hurt you against teams that are bigger and more active on the boards. They're a pretty good team when it comes to turnovers. They average 13.7 turnovers per game, but they force 19, which is tops in the conference. So they do a good job of turning you over. They have a turnover margin of 5.3 per game, so they're good there. They're pretty solid assist team at 13 assists per game. They block 4.6 shots per game, which is fourth in the league. So even though they don't rebound that well, they do block a good bit of shots. And they're second in the league in steals at 11.3. So they're very active out there, getting their hands on the ball and forcing those turnovers. So they have the ability to be a better team. I just think them giving up so much on the boards is going to always hurt you, especially when you start to give up second chance points, and extending possessions for teams on the road. And like I said, losing those two games at home, that hurts a lot to me. I value home games at a much higher clip than I do road games. Now, a team that's going to win a regular season tournament championship is going to have a good road record as well, but you're not going to have a lot of traction in this conference if you don't win at home. And so I put a lot more stock in home wins than I do road wins. Road wins are like bonuses. Home wins are mandatory. But Tanaj Petway is averaging 24 points per game. He's shooting 30% from three. He averages 4.3 rebounds per game, which is second on the team. And he has 11 steals on the season, which is also second on the team. Braylon Bush is also in double figures at 12 points per game, and Jordan Tillman is at 10.5. I think this team, I don't think they're out of it by no stretch. They took a big tumble in the rankings, but they got a chance to kind of get themselves back right, playing Bama State on Saturday and Alabama A&M on Monday. If they can go on the road and split that, I think coming out of the first 4 weekends at 4-4, I think that would be good. If they could sweep that puts you at 5-3, and that's even better. If they go 0-2 on the road, I think you can start to kind of say this team might be in a little bit of trouble. because they will be coming out of that at 3-5, and that puts you in a really tough spot because more teams are going to start to pull away from you. So they definitely need at least a 1-1 weekend on the road this upcoming weekend to keep themselves in the hunt, because they are, they're on a slide right now. Even though it's only a 2-game slide, but it's a very important 2-game slide. They need to snap it and snap it right away. That takes us to our number 16 on the rankings, and that's Alabama State. They beat Alabama A&M on Saturday, so that was their only game this weekend. They moved up from 8 to 6. They're 3-2 right now, 7-11 overall. They got back on the winning track after losing 2 games in a row on the road. So that little 3-game swing they had between Mississippi and Alabama, they went 1-2 on that stretch, and now they get Prairie View and Texas Southern at home this weekend. So they have an opportunity to continue to get themselves in a good spot. And they showed a lot of resiliency on Saturday, because I really thought that A&M was going to run away with their game, being up by 13 at the half. But Bama State was able to play better defense in the second half, and offensively they played extremely well. And they're scoring 76 points per game, which is second in the league. And they're giving up 71 points per game. So they have a scoring margin of 5.2 points per game, which is fourth in the league. So they're a team who can definitely put the ball in the basket. They're shooting 43% from the field. The opponents are shooting 42%. Both of those numbers are sixth in the league. When it comes to 3-point shooting, they're shooting 33%, 44 of 132. So they shoot a lot of threes as well. They have the second most 3-point attempts on the season, and they've made the second most threes in the conference. So they're a team who shoots the ball a lot, and they're pretty solid at it. They make 8.8 threes per game, so almost 9 threes per game. They're making their 3-point defense is pretty low at 35%. But this team is, their average team on the board is at 35.6 rebounds per game. The opponents average 35 rebounds per game, so they're at a positive plus 0.6. So they're winning the rebounding battle most times. Although occasionally they may lose it when the margin is that close, but they winning it most times. They average 9.4 turnovers per game, which is very, very, very good. That's tops in the league by far. They force 14 turnovers per game, so they have a plus 5 turnover margin, and they average 12 assists per game. So they do a good job of taking care of the basketball. You're not really going to force them out of what they do. They're a really solid team when it comes to guys that play guard position. And they have a lot of versatility, and they're a very athletic team. They only block 1.8 shots per game, so they're not really a strong rim protecting team right now. And they're averaging about 7.8 steals per game. But this team does have some capable scorers. Martin Knox is at 16.4 points per game. CJ Hines is at 14.6. Michael Simpson had 3 big threes in that Alabama A&M victory. He's averaging 10.6 points per game, and TJ Madlock is at 9 points per game. Madlock actually leads the team at 6.4 rebounds per game from a guard spot. He's a very good rebounding guard. And like I said, they have a lot of guys who are capable of putting the ball in the basket. Simpson is shooting 44% from 3, Hines 41, Knox is at 38. And they have a few guys that are pretty active on the boards. Michael Octave is at 6.2 rebounds per game, and Hines also at guard is averaging 4.2 rebounds per game. And Hines and Knox both have 14 assists per game, and Knox has 7 steals, and Octave has 8 steals. So this, like I said, this is a team I think is gonna definitely be. They had a slow finish last season, so I want to see them continue to be more consistent throughout the season, because they're a team who can get up and down the floor when they need to. They can shoot when they need to, and they play solid defense. when they need to, and they take care of the ball extremely well. All those things are going to keep you in that mix. I just don't know if they have enough to hover at the top of the standings. Now they can win these two games, and come out of their home stand at 5-2. Then you're sitting in a really good spot, and you're going to be sitting somewhere toward the top of the standings, and find yourself in a position to make a move if some things go right. I do think they have opportunity to continue to creep up the standings, playing my number 7 team, and then my team who is number 2. So they have a chance to move up. But if they drop these games, they're gonna drop. So, they kind of in a tedious spot right now. But I think they have opportunity to make some headway if they continue to play well. That takes us to our number 5 team, who had an up and down week. They had as different of performances that you could have in 2 games than you could ever have. They had a 12-point first half against Texas Southern, and then they had a really good game against Prairie View the following Monday, and so that leaves All-Point at 3-2, 3-15 overall. They back on the winning track after losing their last game, and then they pick up a win here, so they went 1-1 on this road trip. They dropped from 4 to 5, not a big drop, but still a drop. That win on yesterday really kept them in a good spot in the standings. And the fact that they beat Bama State is why I got them ahead of Bama State, even though Bama State has a better overall record. Like Bama State 7-11 overall, All-Point 3-15 overall. But they're playing. They're playing. I think Saturday was probably Monday was probably one of their better games. Saturday was the worst game that they played, even though they fought and clawed and got themselves back into that game. They just you're never really gonna overcome a 12-point half. That and shooting extremely poorly in that half, you're never really going to overcome that, and that that makes it hard to win a game. Even that makes it hard to even keep a game close. And right now, this team is really not playing great offense. They're scoring about 66 points per game. Defensively, they're allowing 65, so they do have a positive scoring margin. They really had a tough time putting the ball in the basket. They're shooting 43% from the field, so they do score well inside the 3-point arc. Defensively, they're at 41%. Again, that's a pretty solid number. Their biggest issue this season has been 3-point shooting. They've only taken 79 threes, which ties them for last in the league with Grambling, and they've made 22, which is the second fewest threes made in the league. They're shooting 27% from 3. That's going to always be tough for you. Now they do play good 3-point defense at 29%, and they're making 4.4 threes per game. So they just have struggled from outside, and that's a big key for them. They're averaging 36 rebounds per game. They're giving up 28 rebounds per game, which leads the league. And they had a tremendous rebounding edge over Texas Southern in that game. Even though they won that game, even though they lost that game, they out rebounded TSU by like 20 rebounds. So they're a really good team in terms of rebounding margin at plus 7.8, which leads the conference. Again, this is another team I think is gonna play better as the season goes on. Once those shots start falling, they're probably not going to be a team that lives and dies from 3. Like last season, we had a guy like Gambrell who shoots threes like he breathes. So I don't think they're going to shoot the 3 that much, but I do think once those shots start to fall, this team will be dangerous moving forward. And they got FAMU and Bethune-Cookman at home this weekend, so opportunity to pick up some slack and keep the winning ways going. And like I say, sooner or later, those threes are going to fall. Right now, they're averaging 17 turnovers per game, which is I think that's the second most in the league. So they've had a rough go of it there. They're forcing 13 turnovers per game, so they're a -4 turnover margin. They're averaging 9 assists per game. Again, with the offense kind of being the way it is, those assists not really coming so easily. And they are blocking 3 shots per game, and they're averaging 7.2 steals per game. So they really still are kind of having a kind of up and down go of it right now, and the record reflects that. Marcus Tankersley leads the team with 13.8 points per game. Gaines Wyatt is at 11.8. Benet is at 11.6. So they're a pretty balanced team. Cornelius is at 9 points per game. Williams is at 8. So they're pretty balanced there. Like I say, when you look at they're just struggling from outside, and that's gonna really be a problem. But Benet is averaging 10 rebounds per game, so he's really strong on the boards for them. And the opportunities are there. I think this team, I think they're gonna be in that 3, 4, 5 range. If those shots start to fall, I'm not really worried about this team. Again, kind of like Grambling, I'm not really worried about them right now. I know Coach Bussey is always going to have his guys in the mix as the season goes on. You never really worry about a coach like that pressing and making issues out of things that ain't there. They're gonna be right by the time March comes around. So I'm not really worried about this team. Even though they did drop one spot, I think they're gonna hover around that 3, 4, 5 spot for a long time in these rankings. Speaking of number 4, that's Bethune-Cookman, and they had a good weekend this weekend, going 2-0. Beating Valley and Pine Bluff. They do have a tough task ahead of them going to Jackson State and Alcorn this weekend. They moved from 5 to 4, primarily because Alcorn lost the game this weekend. Bethune-Cookman is a team that plays really good defense. They're not necessarily a team that's gonna outscore you, but they're a team who can stop you from putting the ball in the basket. They're not necessarily gonna fill it up themselves. They scoring 67 points per game, but they do a good job of keeping you from putting the ball in the basket. And if you can do that, then anything else will kind of fall into place. Like I always like to say, defense travels. So that's always going to be a factor for them. In conference play, this team has only given up 60 points or more twice. So they're 1-1 when they give up more than 60 points per game, and 3-0 when they give up less than 60 points per game. So if they keep you under 60, they're probably going to win. And they've done a pretty decent job of that so far this season. Now they do have a big injury issue right now going on. But they can find guys to kind of alleviate the loss of Breon Freeman, who's averaging 16 points per game. They can kind of alleviate that. Then I think they find a guy like Trey Thomas is averaging 13.8 points per game. Reggie Ward is at 10 rebounds, 10 points per game. He's averaging 8 rebounds per game. Ruzan is at 9.6 points per game. So they do have some guys who can kind of shoulder the load. But when you're losing 16 points per game for a while, and a guy that's shooting 42% from the field and 30% from 3, and he's averaging, 3 rebounds and 39 assists, for you and 21 steals, that's a big number to lose. But, I do think, a guy like that is gonna be able to, kind of, guys are gonna have to step up. And I think Monday night they stepped up really good against Pine Bluff. They really played a good defensive game against the Golden Lions, stopping them from getting comfortable and making threes. They made a team that, that shoots the 3 a lot, really uncomfortable on that 3-point line, forced them to play inside a lot, and they were able to kind of withstand a little run that they made and, pull away and win. Like I said, defense is where this team is best at. The opponents are shooting 42% from the field. They're shooting 40%. When you look at what they do in 3-point shooting, they lead the league in 3-point defense at 31% 3-point shooting. They're not great shooting the 3 themselves. They shoot 31%, but they've made 109 threes. Excuse me, let me go to conference numbers. So looking at kind of going back and looking at what they do in conference play, they're shooting 40% from the field in conference play. The opponents are shooting 39, so still a really good field goal defense. Opponents shoot 19% from 3 in conference play. Tremendous 3-point defense in conference play. Right now, they're shooting 33% in conference play at 31 of 93 in conference play. They're making 6.2 threes per game. When you look at what they're doing on the boards, they're averaging 37 rebounds per game. The opponents are at 35, so they are winning the rebounding battle. They do a pretty good job of turnovers. They average 13 turnovers per game. They force 13, so they got a pretty even turnover margin. They average 13 assists per game. Um, they're decent on inside, blocking 4.4 shots per game, and they average 7.8 steals per game. So they are a team that really is a stronger defensive team. Last season the team was a solid defensive team, but they um they weren't they weren't slouches on the defensive side. They were a really good offensive team. So they were able to have guys that can drive and dish, and they had really good shooters from outside, and that caused mismatches for teams. So that's again, this is another team that lost a few guys from last season, and they trying to find their way. But I think they're sitting in a good spot right now, at number 4, with 2 big games ahead of them on the road. If they can split these games, I think they're in a good spot. If they can win them both, that puts them in an even better spot. They lose them both, they're going to drop a little bit, but they'll still be on the plus side of 500 in conference play, so they won't be that bad off. I think, again, this is a team who's going to be in that 3, 4, 5 spot most of the season. And, I think they'll be a solid team in that aspect, and they're going to be a tough team to play in the tournament. Number 3 dropped from number 2. Because of the loss last night, Jackson State dropped from 2 to 3. Because TSU beat them last night, Tigers dropped to 4-1 in conference, 4-14 overall. They went 1-1 on this road trip, and again, like I said earlier, they playing Bethune-Cookman and FAMU at home, so they have an opportunity to get back on track if they can get back and start their winning ways again. This team really can score the ball. They're averaging 80 points per game. The opponents are scoring 76 points per game, so they're playing a little bit of a higher tempo when it comes to scoring. They shoot the ball pretty well from the perimeter. They're shooting 41% from the field. Opponents shooting 43%. They are a really good 3-point shooting team, and this season, right now they're shooting 41% from 3, 45 of 108. So they're really shooting the ball well from outside. They're making 9 threes per game, which leads the league. Opponents shoot 32% from 3. They're a team who a physical presence. Grant is a big body inside. Romello Mansell is a guy who's also strong inside. They're averaging 37 rebounds per game. The opponents average 36, so they win in that margin as well. When it comes to turnovers, they're averaging 14.2 turnovers per game, forcing 13.4. So they slightly in a negative in turnover margin, but not bad. They're averaging 12 assists per game. When you look at what they're doing inside, they're blocking 4.2 shots per game, and they're averaging about 7.8 steals per game. But this team offensively, man, they can knock down shots. They can really knock it down from outside. Ruffin's 10 of 39 for the season, 26%. Mitchell is excuse me. Always forget to hit the conference only numbers. Like I said, Ruffin is 6 of 21 for 29% in conference play. Hunt 4 for 10 for 40%. McMillan is 14 of 25 for 56%. He had a 7 3-pointer game already this season. And Mitchell is 13 of 28 for 46% from outside. So they can fill it up from outside. Ruffin's averaging 16 points per game. Hunt at 12.4. McMillan is at 12. Mansell is at 11.7. And Mitchell is at 10 points per game. Grant's at 8.2. When you look at on the rebounds, Mansell is at why did I lose that? Like I said, in conference play, Mansell is at 7.2 rebounds per game. So this is a pretty solid team. They were in that game pretty much all night last night. A couple late plays hurt them, but this is a team who is gonna definitely be a tough team to knock out. I think they're definitely a contender for the regular season, and they're a contender for the conference championship. So in the tournament. So I think they're gonna be in that 3-2-1 range, pretty much for the most part, barring anything like injuries or any kind of cold streaks. When you shoot like they do, you always got a chance, and so I think that keeps you in games, more so than anything. But the team in front of them is Texas Southern. Tigers are in number 2 spot because they beat JSU last night. They're 4-1, 7-11 overall. They went 2-0 on their road trip. I mean, 2-1 on that, 2-0 on that homestand, and now they are sitting on a 4-game winning streak. So they're playing some pretty solid ball. They started their season off in conference play 0-1. They won their last 4 games, so they're playing well there. Not necessarily doing it in fantastic fashion. They're scoring about 71 points per game. They're giving up 63 points per game. They're playing pretty good scoring defense. They're not really shooting well. They're shooting 40% from the field, which is last in the league. The opponents shoot 37%, so they do play good defense. And they're shooting 33% from 3, 35 of 106. They're making they're making about 7 threes per game. The opponents shoot 33% from 3. And when you look at rebounding, they got, like I said, they're not a great rebounding team. They had a really poor rebounding night against Alcorn, but they averaged 36 rebounds per game. So they really had a really off night on the boards against Alcorn. Even though they won that game by a decent margin, they had a rough night on the boards that night, but they give up 42 rebounds per game. So they do get out rebounded by 6.4, which is the third most in terms of rebounding margin this season. They lead the league in turnover margin. They only turn the ball over 12 times per game, so they take care of the ball pretty well. They force 18.6 turnovers per game, which is second in the league. They average 12.2 assists per game, so they're pretty solid there as well. When you look at what they do inside, in terms of blocking shots, they're second in the league at 5.2 blocks per game. And they lead the league with 11 steals, almost 12 steals per game. So they're a really good defensive team. Offensively, they're kind of up and down, but they've been able to get, to slow teams down and, get those turnovers and take care of the ball themselves. Right now, Zaire Hayes averages 16.5 points per game. Dwayne Posey is at 11.2. McLean is at 10.8 points per game. Kenny Hunter is at 8. Hunter also averages 6.2 rebounds per game. He has 8 blocks. McLean has 11 blocks. McLean has 11 steals. Hunter has 8 steals. Hunter leads the team with 9 blocks. And like I said, he leads the team at 6.2 rebounds per game. Right now, McLean is 11 for 27 for 3 for 41%. And they, like I said, they haven't really played a lot of great games. I think this win yesterday was probably the best game that they played all season in conference play. And so just like other teams are, Texas Southern coach Johnny Jones, I don't worry about this team at all at this portion of the season. They're gonna be a factor in the tournament. Until they not, I'm gonna always give Texas Southern that leeway of being a team that's gonna be in the hunt in the tournament. Regular season is just finding form and getting yourself right for the tournament, and they do that really well. And so they're playing some sneaky basketball right now. Like I said, they're on the second longest winning streak in the conference right now. So they are playing, winning basketball. This road trip is going to be interesting to see how they handle it. If they can do well on this Alabama swing, starting off Saturday against Alabama A&M and Monday against Bama State, I think they'll be in a good spot. They jumped from 6-2 because of that 2-0 weekend they had, and they beat 2 teams that were in front of them. So they were able to jump really high in the standings and find themselves in a good spot. And that takes us to our number 1 team, same team as number 1 last week. They basically are number 1 because they survived the weekend. The only other team who was undefeated lost yesterday, so they that kind of kept them at that spot since they did not lose. And that's Southern. Right now, Southern is 10-8 overall, 5-0 in conference. They won 5 games in a row. Right now, this team is the only team with a winning record in winning overall record. Couple bracketologies early has them projected for a 15 seed, but it's way too early to talk about that. They still got a lot of tough games ahead of them, and they have to show that they can win in March, which they haven't done in a long time. So there's still a lot of questions about this team. You know, they're playing well enough. They almost let their game go against Grambling on Saturday, but they did find a way to close that game out in controversial fashion, but they did close it out. This team is one of those teams that doesn't really have the one guy that can do it all. They do it by committee. They're averaging 75 points per game. They're giving up 61 points per game. So they lead the league in scoring margin at 14 points per game. They're second in the league in field goal shooting at 46%. They're second in the league in field goal defense at 38%. They're fourth in the league at 3-point shooting at 35%. They're fifth in the league in 3-point defense at 29%. They make about 7 threes per game. They're 35 of 98. So they don't really shoot a ton of threes because they don't really have a lot of guys who are those type of shooters. But they do have guys who can knock those shots down if they do get hot. Right now, for Southern, Southern's been a team who recently hasn't been a really good rebounding team, but right now they average 37 rebounds per game, which is fifth in the league. They hold opponents to 29.8 rebounds per game, which is second in the league, and they lead the league in rebounding. They're second in the league in rebounding margin at 7.4 rebounds per game. They average 13.6 assists, 13.6 turnovers per game. They force 16, so they have a 2.8 turnover margin. They average 14 assists per game, which is second in the league, and they have an assist to turnover ratio of 1.06, which is second in the league as well. This team blocks 4.8 shots per game. Again, that's something Southern doesn't traditionally do well. But they've done it here, and they average 10 steals per game. So, all those things add up to a team that should be sitting in that spot right now. Whether they remain there as the season goes on, that remains to be seen, because I think the one thing that this team doesn't have is that one go-to guy. In all 5 of their games, I think they had a different leading scorer at least 3 or 4 of those games. So they're never gonna really have a guy go for, they might have a guy go for 20, but typically they're gonna have like a guy go for 15 or 16, then a couple guys with 13, somebody with 12, somebody with 10. They're gonna always be that kind of team because they don't play, guys heavy minutes. They basically play 10 to 11 guys in 5-man units. So they're not really gonna have that one guy who can always get the shots up consistently. Right now, Jordan Johnson leads the team at 10.8 points per game, but you also have Jones at 9.6, Tozino at 8.5, Amber Reed at 7.4, Thomas at 7.2, Barnes at 6.6, Jacobs at 6.6, Manning at 6.2, DuBois at 5. So they have any one of those guys could lead the team in scoring because they don't necessarily have that one guy. And that's good and bad because, sometimes it's bad, especially on the road in conference play. You sometimes need that guy who's going to go get those buckets for you all the time. And when you count on different units, sometimes things don't always fall the way that they should. But right now, Johnson leads the team shooting 41% from 3, 14 of 34. Jones is shooting 84% from the field. He's 21 of 25. He's the guy who does a lot of work in the paint. So he's gonna definitely get those buckets inside. He does well there. Right now, the leading rebounder is Thomas at 4.8 rebounds per game. Barnes at 5.6 rebounds per game. Thomas at 4.8. Amber Reed averages 3.4 assists per game, and Manning is at 3.6 assists per game. And like I said, they have a ton of guys with a bunch of steals. Nunnally leads the team right now with 15 steals. And Thomas has 5 blocks to lead the team. If I had to say the one thing that Southern has as a true Achilles heel, it hasn't really hurt them yet, but they they struggle at the free throw line. They're second to they're 11th in the league in free throw shooting at 59%. That's gonna come back and hunt you at some point in a game, especially most likely on the road. You're not gonna always be able to win those games shooting 60 to 65%. You're gonna have some games where where you shoot 3 free throws well. Now they were able to knock down 7 of 8 free throws at the end of the game on Saturday, so that was good. But the rest of the game, they shot poor from the free throw line, so they really gonna have to be better there. That's the one. That's like the only negative stat that this team has right now. I do think, like I said, I do wonder, can they maintain that platoon system that they're running? Or if they're gonna be able to, keep that balanced attack all the time and not have that one guy that can get the buckets for them. This weekend is gonna be interesting. Pine Bluff's a dangerous team. The record's not great, but they're a dangerous team, and anytime Southern goes up there, it's tough. Valley is always a iffy type of game. You never know what you're gonna get from Valley and Urbana. So this is not an easy road trip for Southern. It's not the hardest either, but it's one that if you're not focused, you could come home with 1 loss or even 2. So they're not out of the woods by no means. Being at 5-0 after 3 weekends of basketball is good, but it ain't nothing right now. So we're gonna continue to see how Southern does moving forward. But that's gonna do it for today's show, man. I thank y'all for tuning in, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.